Welcome to Modern Handgunners, everybody. I'm Bob Mayne, and with me is
Ben Branam. How you guys doing? Today, we thought we'd give you something to watch and learn about and hear about during your whole coronavirus freaking pandemic, stay at home, lockdown, whatever you want to call it, mess. Got to have something to do, right?
Yeah, you got to have something to do. If you are relatively new to watching our videos, I'm the host of the Handgun World podcast, a practical show on firearms. And Ben, give out your podcast name.
I'm at modernselfprotection.com, and that's my podcast, Modern Self Protection.
And together we do Modern Handgunners, which it's been a while since we did one. We're sorry about that, but now here we are. We all have to do a lot of staying at home, so we thought we would do some content. Hey, let's make a deal, Ben. We just mentioned the last of COVID-19 on this video. How's that?
That works for me. You won't hear that from me again.
All right. So let's get into some guns. We're going to talk about some Glocks today, aren't we?
Yes. Different types of Glocks, how they work, some of the innovation, and whether they suck or not.
Whether they suck or not. Okay, let's talk about that. So, still today, Glock pretty much is probably the most popular semi-auto sold. Even if you don't like Glock, you have to admit that there's still probably more of them sold than any others, especially to the private sector, right?
And probably for good reason. They started the whole craze of modern manufacturing and these plastic guns and how it's done. And just Gaston was a genius to get this thing going. So it actually worked. Before the Glocks came out in 84, 86, it was hit and miss with autoloaders. And most of the time, 1911s and stuff were the way to go, but you had to have them tuned by somebody that really knew what they were doing. Even back in the 80s, you were looking at like a $2,000 gun to make sure the stupid thing ran. Some of the SIGs were starting to come out, and they were over $1,000 each. So and that's 1980s too. That was the actual price. That's not inflation adjusted. So when I was making a third of what I was now or less, it's yeah. So they were expensive. And then Glock came in and made them super cheap. A lot of things about imports and stuff were problems. In the 1980s, you had Reagan shot. And after that, you had the Saturday night special bills start to come around. And actually, that was one of Glock's problems with importing to the United States. So it was kind of cool to see the history is that, Glock was made so cheaply that if they imported them at just a normal cost for them to make a profit, that they would have been considered a Saturday night special. Americans wouldn't have bought them because they were junk, $100 gun, give or take. I don't know what the pricing would have been, but it wouldn't have been the $400 or $350 that they came out at. It would have been like $250 or $200, and they would have been considered Saturday night specials, which would have put them in an import ban, and nobody would have bought them.
Yeah, so it would have been tough.
Yeah, so they almost doubled the price just to get them past the import ban so they could get them into the country. And made an absolute killing on the gun at that price, since they wanted to price them at like $200 and they had to price them at like $350. Another $150 of profit every time. That was probably tripled their profit margin on the gun. And so that's just interesting tidbits of Glock history and lore. It's the most fun thing I think about Glocks and their lore. Another lore that you might or might not know, Bob. On the bottom of all the Glocks, we have this little steel plate.
Yeah.
That is the serial number.
Yeah.
And you can see my serial number. It's actually my wife's gun, so don't be stealing my wife's serial number off her gun. That little steel plate, everybody says, oh, that was put there for the serial number. Actually, that's the part of the Glock that would droop under heavy fire and heat and would make the gun kind of explode out the front of the gun. But they put this little tiny piece of metal right there. I mean, it's tiny, right? And then that kept the front of the gun from drooping, and you had less problems like the recoil spring shooting out the front of the slide and stuff, and it made the gun 10 times more reliable under heavy use. So a lot of cool stuff like that you learn over years and years of the lore of Glock and these little things that it comes out. But really a great pistol, just started the whole craze. And Bob, you're famous for going, everybody makes a Glock now. There's Smith & Wesson Glocks, there's Turkish Glocks, there's
here it is. We have American-made Glocks. we have Croatian-made Glocks, we have SIG German-made Glocks, we have Czech-made Glocks, we have what else is there out there? There's
The Turkish ones.
oh yeah, the Canics, a Turkish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my point is everybody's imitating Glock, and when their patent expired, I guess is when everybody started making similar. And I say that jokingly, but take your M&P apart and take your Glock apart, field strip it, and look at the frame. They're very very similar. Take a CZ, take a CZ, one of their striker fired, and hold it up next to the Glock. Look at the similarities. So, take
Well,
your favorite striker fired.
and
Yeah,
don't forget Smith and Wesson back in the 90s
with the SV
actually
models.
actually
Yes.
had those SV models. The not the SV. Crap, I forget the model name now. But
Sigma,
Sigma,
right?
yeah, that one, the Sigma. And it was a cheap knockoff of the Glock that they just changed the grip angle on. And everybody's like, ooh, it feels better. It didn't work as well because they didn't get the manufacturing correct. And then they actually got sued because you could take the slide off of your Glock and put it on your Sigma and the thing would run.
Well,
So,
let me tell you
yeah.
something else about that. I'll tell you something else. I don't know if this is still possible today, but when I first got an M&P, when I got my first M&P 9 full size, I think it was about a year after they came out. Somebody told me you could take the recoil spring assembly out of a Glock 17 and put it into an M&P 9, and I didn't believe them. And so I did it and went to the range and it shot just fine.
Well, so that doesn't surprise me in modern manufacturing now because
Yeah.
before 20 years ago, 30 years ago, Glock was making all their own springs for the gun. Now you've got all these other companies like Wolf and magazines, especially Mekar magazines. They make probably 50% of your magazine parts for every gun on the market. I mean, Smith and Wesson didn't want to say it, but their Mekar is the only Italian company that really makes guns out there besides Beretta, and they make all magazines and magazine parts. Well, Caltech just straight up uses Mekar magazines for all of their stuff, and then Smith and Wesson never wanted to admit it, but they said they had an Italian maker that made the springs for their magazines in their M&P series guns, and I'm like, so that's Mekar, and I'm sitting in the armorers class, and the guy's like, I'm not allowed to say
All
that. So
right, so let's talk about these Glocks. Um, and I have what I'm going to talk about real quickly is a nicely modified Gen 3. This is a nicely modified, and I'm going to talk about some of the modifications. And I really believe the Gen 3 Glock now is very much overlooked because you got the Gen 4s and the new cool Gen 5s and all the other striker fired guns. But if you're watching this and you have a Gen 3 Glock, you have a mighty fine pistol, in my opinion. And then a little later, I will talk about my new Gen 5. Here's my new Gen 5, and I'll show you guys. It's a clear gun, okay? So now I can finally send the slide home on it. What are you going to talk about, Ben?
So the only one I've got left in my collection whole still is a Gen 5, and really I only have it because it's my wife's gun. I figured one Glock is enough. I don't really like them. I have frames and pieces sitting around. I sold off. I used to have a Gen 3 that I turned into a Franken gun, and I sold that off to a friend. And I used to have a Gen 4 that I traded for a PCC rifle, and I kept the Gen 5. I was going to sell this Gen 5. I bought this Gen 5 when it first came out. It was one of the first runs of guns to do a test on, and then I was going to sell it off. And my wife shot it just as part of the test. She's running the camera for me, and she goes, "Ooh, I love this thing. It's the best ever." So I'm like, "Well, it's yours." So
It's
now
your, it is
this is my
yours
wife's
now.
gun, and she absolutely loves it. But that's the only gun I have left is the Gen 5. And honestly, this was the first run of them that came out. This is the Glock 19. There's so much more that I would buy right now. The
The
Glock
second
19,
one.
yeah, the Glock 19X, I really like, even though I know it's not a concealed carry gun anymore because of the longer frame. The one that you have, Bob, is that the 45?
No, no, no. This is
Oh, this is
the
the
new Gen 5 Glock 19, the newest version with the front slide serrations. Hopefully they can see that in the camera. The front slide serrations and the lack of a cutout on the grip in the front. Yes, Ben's showing his. So this is there's two versions of Gen 5s for people who didn't know. There's the version that Ben has, and then there's the FS version, which FS means front serrations.
So the front serrations I don't really care about. The Glock Gen 5s are my favorite, except for the little cutout right there for that
Yep.
magazine that was supposed to help you get it
You
out.
can.
And
Yep.
yeah, his is gone, which is awesome. What happened to me is, and I know Bob had the same problem, when I gripped the gun, I
I
got that
do.
little hole right there, and man, it
Yep.
was digging into my pinky when I shot the gun,
Yeah.
especially if I was trying to
Mine
run
too.
it. I was trying to run it real fast, and I would get the crush grip on the gun, and man, that thing, I could feel it halfway through a class. We took a class together, and I was running this gun, and the stippling is too sharp for me. I mean, I grip the gun hard enough where you probably can't see it on the camera, but if I hold it for like 10 seconds really hard and then I pull it off, I can see the texturing in my hand.
Yeah.
And you can almost
Yeah.
read it after a while, honestly, when we were doing that class, you could read the Glock logo on the side. They put the little patent number right here. You could read that on my hand. And I'm like, this texturing just is not right for me. It hurts. So that's why I don't use the Glocks. But I really like the Gen 5s the best. No finger grooves. The finger grooves never fit my hand.
That's right. No finger grooves.
The only
Yes.
thing that they messed up is they didn't put the undercut in the trigger guard. Everybody
Right.
that does that, the first thing they do is undercut the trigger guard. If that was undercut, I'd get rid of the Glock knuckle, and I'd be set on this Gen 5. So if,
Yeah.
hey, that one looks like it has the undercut done to it, Bob.
It does. It
Oh,
does.
is that
Yes.
your?
This is my Gen 3. This
Oh,
is
that's the
my
one.
Gen 3. So
See,
let's talk about that. I
Bob
had a
had
nice.
his altered exactly
See
how I
that?
would have mine altered to go with
Yeah.
the texturing and the undercut.
Yeah.
So Glock
It's
is
got
not
the
the perfect
undercut
pistol.
texturing. Yeah. Now let me say something about texturing. Okay. Um, with this Gen 3, if you can see in the camera, I did not have any texturing put on the sides. Uh, and all only had texturing put on the front strap and on the back strap. And the reason I did that is because this right here, this is the part that touches my body if I'm not wearing a t-shirt. So I didn't want texturing there because that hurts. But I can still get a real good grip because I've got the texture on the front and on the back. I'd recommend that.
So you can see there are problems with the Gen 4s and the Gen 5s. I
Yeah.
really like the Gen 4 and Gen 5 over the Gen 3. One that even if I had the Gen 4, which is probably my favorite right now, but they added the you could put this back strap on here. And if you see
Yeah.
this giant freaking thing on there, that is for me. I have meat hooks for hands, these giant hands, and when I grab the gun, honestly, on a normal Glock, my hand sits so high on it that the back of the frame would rub right here on my hands. And if I don't know if you can see it, but I have years of doing that on a Glock, and I actually have scars on my hand where you can see exactly the width of the slide is my scars from where the slide would give me a little bit of bite when I was shooting. Every time it would run on the top of my hand, and after a while it would break the skin, and I'd have a little bit of cut there. Really annoying. There was a company, I forget what it was called, Grip Pod or something, Grip
Grip
something.
force adapter.
Grip Force adapter you could put on your Glock Gen 3 right here to make this little beaver tail. And that's how I ran guns. When I found that, I was like, oh, now I can run a Glock Gen 3.
Yeah.
And I did that. But when the Gen 4 and the Gen 5s came out with this beaver tail, I just put that in there. And for me, it was perfect. Glock did it right with their, again, they weren't the first person to do this adjustable grip, but I think they were the smartest in doing it. Because if you have the grip in there, you put the medium or the large side on the back. But if you take it off, that's the smallest one. Where all the M&Ps, all this other stuff. I mean, some of the guns that's even an integral part of the gun running. If I took off the grip, the extra grip panel on some of the guns, they wouldn't run. The M&P, there's nothing there when you take off the grip. You have to have a grip module in there. So the Glock, if you just take it all off and strip it, you don't have anything. You still have to have this pin in there, though. The pin that holds the grip in there, it actually holds part of the gun together. I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but it's definitely cheaper to have one pin than two pins in there for manufacturing ways. And the
And
pin
that's what it
holds.
looks like without the beaver tail on it. This is the Gen 5. This is the way it comes out of the box. And for my hand, it fits perfectly without the beaver tail. I don't have that issue quite as bad as you do with slide bite. But
No.
um,
And
yeah,
actually,
you're right. They did it well with
and I think they
the
did it really well where other companies could have taken from them and used it, even though Smith and Wesson did it before Glock, and a couple other companies did it before Smith and Wesson. But Um, and ironically, Glock, if you get rid of that pin that holds everything down, if you lost it, the gun would still run. That pin holds in your firing block back here. Well, with the slide on there, that'll hold on into the firing block and it fits tight enough to where it will stay there and the gun will actually run. You might have some trigger that it's not going to feel right, but the gun will run. It's hilarious that parts fall out of my Glock and it still runs. It's one of the things that I actually like about the Glock. Some of them, if you don't have the steel guide rod in the front and they start getting hot in here, the plastic guide rod inside the spring will actually get small enough to in the front and it will melt and shoot out the front of the Glock. But if you don't take the gun apart, the gun will continue to run. And that's what I love about gear that fails. Everything is going to fail sooner or later, but it doesn't fail catastrophically. The new Gen 5, by the way, I'm looking at it, has a steel guide rod on there, so it's probably not going to go anywhere. But the old ones have the plastic guide rod. But the 3, if you shot it 1,000 rounds really fast in half a day or so, that front guide rod will melt and shoot out the front of your gun. But the dang gun will continue to run. It doesn't matter until you take the gun apart. So for me, that's a failure that I'm okay with. If I'm firing away and at a bad guy and the front it fires out at him, big deal as long as the gun keeps running, right? And then I can fix that later after my gunfight. So I totally admire that the Glock can have pieces missing and broken and falling out, and that the gun will still run. It's one. I'm not sure how Gaston did that, or if he did it on purpose, or if it was something that happened. But man,
Who knows?
kudos to that one where parts fall out of the gun and it keeps running. That's just incredible.
And I'd like to make a comment on that because if you're, especially, there's a lot of new gun owners today. If you're a new gun owner and you just picked up a Glock, that is one of the great benefits. Even if you don't like Glock pistols, the darn things are gonna run. They're probably, I would say, if not the most reliable semi-automatic, they're one of the top 3 reliable these days semi-auto pistols that you can get. And I have never had a part break on me on a Glock. You have had it. I've never had it, but they're just reliable. Now, the only time I've seen Glocks fail is when people mess around too much with the internals and they modify the snot out of it, then they fail. But a factory, this is a 100% factory Glock 19 Gen 5, and this thing, I mean, it's so reliable. I'm impressed by how reliable it is.
Yeah, even my Gen 5 has the factory crappy plastic sights on it. It's
Yep.
completely out of the box. And I'm looking at this one closer, and it
So
does have a plastic guide rod on it. So,
it does, yes.
but like I care if it flies out the front of the gun. Like I said, I'll get another one later. I might even have one sitting around that I have so many Glock parts, and that's kind of how you do it. But Bob, you said an important thing that I don't want to gloss over here. Everybody today wants to do Gucci Glocks. I mean, there's whole Suarez International, half of his company is training, the other half is Gucci Glocks, which I don't mind. If you want a Gucci Glock, go for it, but you need to test the crap out of it and know that people
But
haven't tested it.
Gabe does fantastic work on them, and he does it right.
Yeah, and most of the things I've seen from Gabe have been right, but I have seen some bad stuff done by Gabe too. I mean, they all do an accident every once in a while, and even Glock does. So I can't be bad on Gabe that way. But man, the more you go Gucci on these things, the more you got to test them to make sure they work. If it comes from the factory, you go out and you shoot it, 100, 200 rounds. I'd test my life. I'd trust my life on it, no problem. As long as it goes 100 or 200 rounds without major failures when it first comes, I haven't had any problems. The one Gen 4 I had major problem with it at round 400 exactly. Pieces fell out of the Glock. The stupid thing still ran. I was at a class, and at exactly 400 rounds, I know because I took it out to the range, shot it 100, 200 rounds. I'm like, oh, it's good to go. I shot it exactly 100 rounds, actually 2 boxes. I just wanted to make sure it was good to go for the class I was going into. I want to try it. I was running Glock Gen 3 at the time, so not a big thing. So we shoot all of day 1, and I shoot 300 rounds exactly. And at the end of the day, we're doing some just gun manipulations, and I noticed that I push the gun, try to put it back into battery, rack it, and then make sure it goes back in battery. I push on the back of the slide. No, I noticed that I pushed the slide, and it's back in battery, but it would go forward about a half an inch and then come back. And I'm
Okay.
like, there is something really wrong with my gun. But again, I don't know when that happened, but this little piece right here and the little spring in there that holds it all together, it fell out and it was gone. So
That's
I was
very rare.
missing.
Very
Actually, it was
rare.
kind of common for a little bit in the Gen 4s when they first
Oh,
came
okay.
out. And again, I had one of the first guns off the production. But again, the gun ran. If I didn't take it apart, and I have no idea at what point during the day the gun fell apart and the piece fell out. It was at the end of the day when I noticed that there's a problem.
So
So
let's talk about modifying. Uh, if you modify a Glock too much, I think you're asking for problems. Now, if you do, there are very good gunsmith companies that are very good at modifying Glocks. Suarez International is one of them. Boresight Solutions is another. They didn't sponsor this video. I just happen to know about them. So full disclosure. However, I think, in my opinion, even though I'm guilty on this one of doing a lot of modifications, in my opinion, the best thing to do, leave them stock. And I think if you're going to buy a Glock pistol and you're not going to modify it, get the Gen 5. Get the newest Gen 5 because it's got all the cool things. It's got it's got the oversized mag release button. It's actually got a better uh, slide release or slide stop button, whatever terminology you want to use it, and it's ambidextrous. The slide stop is ambidextrous. Okay, it's got the front serrations, which I kind of like the front serrations for, you know, manipulating the gun. They have orange followers on the magazine. One of the reasons that that's important is when the magazine is in the pistol and you can get a visual indication that hey, it's empty. Okay, um, and some of the new Gen 5s come with Ameriglow night sights. This one I didn't spend the money on it, but if you want, you spend a little extra money, you can get nice Ameriglow night sights on them.
So I think we beat that horse, and now you know what you can get, right? Glock Gen 5 is just the
Yep.
way to go if you can get one right now. Um,
Yeah, that's the problem.
Stuff is down, and I can tell I'm looking at this Gen 5 I got, and I've used it more than Bob has his because the I actually got the paint wearing off on the slide stop lever on both sides. Yours is nice and
Mine's
black.
black.
Yeah, mine is nice and shiny. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's from putting my hands on them and using them all the time and
yeah.
working it. So Bobby, you need to take that gun out and give it a little more workout. And
It's got a 1,000 round trigger job, but not much more than that. And
it needs a little bit more
couple of other
work.
things. Couple of other things before we conclude this video, real quickly. I also highly recommend the Larry Vickers base pads for a Glock, for any gun actually. But one of the reasons I like it is because, see if I can do this correctly here so you can see this. There, that might be better. You see how wide it is on the bottom? And what makes that a good advantage is to rip this out of the pistol, you can grip the magazines from the sides. I don't want to get too complicated on people, but it's a nice feature because I think Glock got it wrong. They screwed up when they made the Gen 5s initially with the stupid cutout in the front because going like this to rip the gun out is not rip the magazine out. That's not the ideal way. I think the ideal way is to do it that way. What do you think?
I think they were trying to solve a problem that didn't exist. But
Yeah.
Glock is out there to make guns. So if they had some of their law enforcement agencies saying that this is a problem, do that. And for me, I'm if I'm running tactical guns, I love my Glock 19. I love the grip strides. I love the recoil impulse from the 4-inch gun. Yes, I can tell the difference between the 4-inch slide and the 4.5-inch slide and the 5-inch slide from the 17 and the 35, and I like the impulse on this one better. It's
Me
just
too.
a little faster. Um, I like everything about the Glock 19 over the bigger Glocks. But every time I was doing tactical stuff, I would just run a Glock 17 mag out of there. Why? Because it sticks out. If I need to rip it or grab it out or get it in there, it sticks out that quarter of an inch, and I
Good
could
point.
always just
Good
grab it. I
point.
didn't bring any magazines with me, and honestly, so all the Glock 19 magazines I have, the 15 rounders that sit flush, are the only the ones that came with my gun. And the only time I use it is if I'm concealed carrying a Glock 19. That would be my first magazine in there, so I can hide it a little bit better. My other magazines were all Glock 17 magazines, so I have hundreds probably. Okay, maybe that's an exaggeration, but I probably have close to 50, maybe 100 Glock 17 magazines floating around the house because that's what I use all the time. The Glock 19 mags, I never bought one. They just, two of them came with a gun, three of them came with a gun, and that's the ones I've got. So it's kind of
Yep.
cool. If you want to worry about ripping your mag out, just use that little bit of extended magazine, and that's what the Glock is designed to do. And so you can
Yeah.
just rip it out. I absolutely love that about Glock 2. I wish that other guns would have figured that out. We have very
I
few
wish they
guns
would
on
have
the
too.
market that the little guns will take the big magazines. Croatian Glock, the Springfield Armory XDs, they actually started doing that a lot, but they need a base
I'm gonna
blade
get
and
some
pad and
bad
stuff.
comments on that.
Hey, I think it's hilarious because you're right. I mean, we call it a Croatian Glock. If you go to their history, XD is fun. You look at it was the HS 2000. Guess what year it came out? In the 2000s, and everybody thought it was a piece of junk. And they didn't. Their manufacturing wasn't great down there in Croatia, but they were
Yeah.
selling them in America, and people were liking them. Springfield went, ta-da! We need a striker-fired gun to compete with Glock. And they bought out. I don't know if they bought the whole company, they bought the factory, they bought the rights, whatever. But they're
I
still
think
produced
they
in
did.
Croatia, and now they're called the XD. And now they have
Yep.
the XD Mod 2, the XDM, the XD. There's one more now too,
Whatever. Yeah, there's several of them.
but they're all made down in Croatia. So not that it's a
Yep.
problem. I mean, most of the Glocks are still made overseas. Some of them
Most of
here in
them.
America now. This one says made in Austria right on the side of it,
Yep.
and so does the slide. So
Does
some of
mine.
them,
Mine says
so
made in Austria. Yep.
some of them you can actually find the slide that says USA on it, and
USA.
their little thing will say Made in America on the side of them. I saw those going around, and for a while it was kind of fun at the gun shop. They were different colors. You put them out on the
Yeah.
display together, and when you put them next to each other, you could see that the slide was a different color black. The frames were
Yep.
all the same, but you could tell the American made ones from the Austrian made ones, and that was them ramping up their plant so that they can import and make the smaller guns that they couldn't import. The
Yep.
Glock
Couple.
43, 48,
Yep. Yeah,
42.
we'll probably do a video on the 43, 43X, and 48 coming up soon. A couple of things I want to say to new gun owners. One reason why, and this is the last couple of things I'll say, and then I'll be quiet. One of the reasons I really recommend the Glock Gen 5s, if you're new, you get 3 magazines. 3. A lot of the other manufacturers don't even give you 3; they give you 2. Actually, I've seen some that give you 1 magazine. With the Glock Gen 5s, you get 3. And folks, I'm not sponsored by Glock, so and neither are you, Ben. But
I wish. If you'd like to
yeah, I
sponsor me,
wish.
Glock, I'll say up all the good things about your pistol as we go.
And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll give you the last word. You can get Glock parts almost anywhere, and almost any dealer has Glock parts. Try to take one of your other semi-automatic guns and go to a gun store and ask them if they can replace some parts. Oh, we got to order those because I don't think we have them in stock. But if you have a Glock, there's a real good chance that they have them in stock. That's all I'll say.
And on the Glock, I'll give you one more good thing about that, and then I'll shut up pitching Glock, is that almost everybody that's in a gun counter or in the gun world can take these things apart to the frame and can figure out what's wrong with them, replace parts, and put them back together. That's not true for your Smith & Wesson, your XDs. Smith & Wesson is pretty simple. I'm a certified armorer for them, and they're pretty simple right up there with the Glock. They have like 2 more moving parts and another part under spring tension, so it's kind of annoying, but they're super easy too. The XDs are like a puzzle under spring tension. So are the Sky pistols. There's a lot of them that are just, you need to have an actual armorer to be able to take them apart to the frame and replace the little parts in there. Where Glock, half of the guys that have any experience in the world and that run Glocks can take a punch, and they used to sell a Glock tool that was a punch that would take out every piece on this gun. You didn't need multiple punches. You could use one. And all of us that have been operating these things for a long time, we can take them apart, we can field strip them, and we can go all the way to the frame, replace all the small parts, and put them back together. And that's most of
Yep.
the guys in the gun counter too, and at gun shops and at ranges. You could always find somebody standing there that if you go, hey, my Glock's broken, I don't know what's wrong with it. If you hand them to them, they'll be like, oh yeah, this is the part. And I probably have
Yep.
one of those.
And
I
they
might have
probably
one of those in my
stock.
bag even, or I
Yeah,
probably
in
have
their
one in
bag.
stock, or this
Oh
get
yeah.
it from this guy. So it's super
Yeah.
easy. That would be a great thing about the Glocks too. So if you're a new gun owner, the Glock is a simple, easy way to go. You don't know what you like, what you don't like. Buy a Glock and figure out if you like it or if you don't.
And you can always easily sell it if you don't. Okay,
Yep.
so folks, thanks for watching Modern Handgunners. I'm Bob Mayne from the Handgun World podcast, and you are.
Ben Branam from Modern Self Protection. You're going to get more great videos like this. Me and Bob are going to start doing videos and podcasts on the Modern Handgunners again because, well, we need something to do right now, and it's a great way for us to get together and enjoy talking about our true passion in life. I mean, the only
Yeah,
thing I'm more passionate
firearms.
about in life is probably my wife. Other than that, it's guns.
Good
And
for you. That's good. Me too. I'll
but
say this.
sometimes the guns win out. I got to tell you, she makes
Um,
me mad. Guns never make me mad.
I want to remind everybody, check the show notes at the bottom of this video. Check the links. There'll be links to our podcasts and everything, and it's easy to find. All right, Ben, this was good stuff. Let's do a part 2 pretty soon.
Cool. Thanks everybody for listening. Modern Handgunners out.